it very loose by saying nothing and allowing the two titans of the game to pour their guts onto the kitchen floor. I think that's...
And you got the song at the start, you got that sorted?
I got the song sorted out, yeah.
Cool.
The band said they'd be here in about 10 minutes time.
Nice.
And then we'll go.
I have no idea how to start really. Should we just grab a question and go for it?
Yeah.
Cool. So just to put it in context, we've got
these are questions for you guys, yeah?
Casserole bowl with questions.
The casserole bowl of truth.
Yeah, it's nice.
Okay, here we go. For £10. Fletch, I'm going to go with you first.
It's a long question.
I want a strong start. How do we make sure players who experience different coaching at junior and senior level stay engaged in the game?
What would jump out there straight away is, I think that's a good thing. So I think it should be celebrated, the fact that there is differences, environments and coaches will be different. If you truly believe in adaptability and players having those skills to be able to take in information in lots of different ways, in lots of different environments, and then doing well, both in training and the games, then I think we need to celebrate it a bit more. I definitely hear noise around, it's good, it's bad, it's not, it's just different. However, I think we can also better support our coaches around actually what current best practice might look like.
Yeah.
That would be something that would jump out to me.
So what's going to keep anybody engaged?
Oh, there'd be
in this game?
Yeah, there'd be some principles around players feeling valued, players feeling safe, players feeling as though they're getting better, players feeling valued. They would be the things that would jump out at the start.
How do you do it at the uni?
Keep it to those values. I think the uni approach in particular, my sense of it, I must say on the outside looking in, is that they're really, really joined up at what the questioner would call junior and senior level. I think there's a lot more momentum from the players. I think players join this college club, as it were, seeing the pathway of junior to senior, seeing it maybe as one entity, and sometimes one coaching team. I think it's a little bit removed from what you might call a club environment, in that maybe that gap between junior and senior might see very many more guys leave the junior club because life has taken them somewhere else. You know, our guys, I think, join on somewhat more of a rugby mission than maybe your average player does. I don't want to speak about or for any one of the players, but sometimes that mission might mean that they're maybe too rugby focused, would be an interesting point. We do a lot of thinking at the uni about the resistant learner. So how can you, without denting the motivation and the focus of someone, actually broaden their focus? Everything that they would have heard from many of the stakeholders would be about focusing down onto and not being distracted. How do you prepare for A-levels? You know, focus down onto, parcel out some time, consistency, do it every day. Sometimes that absolutely is the way forward in all of these learning endeavours. But in terms of movement, I think you guys would be very comfortable with the idea of a broader base of movement skills and keeping people away from that early specialisation. And I say early specialisation as a technical term, but also just as a common sense.
We were chatting about creating adaptable players. So actually having their ability to adapt. It was interesting last night listening to some of the stuff. I actually thought it was an important thing that I'd not really thought about. That some of the best clubs are doing it, so they don't take one or two colts up. They actually take them up as a group with their friends. Some of the guys are talking about, in our world, they said exactly what you said. It's just one entity. The first team coaches coach with the Colts, the Colts coaches coach with the first team. It's just part of one club. There was a lot of, I mean, once again, we don't need to create a division between the minis and juniors and the first team. And then the other thing, that I'm really interested in now is that they spoke about how few first team coaches are engaging in coach education. So actually, how can we make it exciting for them? How can we have their version of an ice cream van?
Yeah, and I think the most powerful word potentially today, Fletch has used already, and it's one that we're thinking about all the time, is this idea of safety, psychological safety. My advice, my point of focus would be, how can we provide that for anybody? Working with guys on a postgraduate course, or with guys as professional learners out there as practitioners, that sense of how can you give them permission to sit down and doubt themselves a little, broaden their own focus a little, without me, and I'm often just parachuted in, or this could be a first meeting, let's say, without me seeming to be criticising them, because I think it's all contextual. If I've not coached in your shoes, I've really got to be respectful, it seems to me, and have some principles, but also principled things to say. I'm genuinely here for you, and I'm interested in you, and I notice that would be a great.
Give me some practical. I'm now interviewing you.
Yeah.
Give me some practical examples. So if someone was thinking, "Oh, that sounds brilliant, psychological safety, get that." We would want people to doubt themselves. I'm hearing vulnerability. Give me some practical examples that you've noticed. Or
my view on the whole gig is counselling and coaching are virtually synonymous. So what would a counsellor do? Poor counselling would be that Mr. or Mrs. X turns up, and 5 minutes in, the counsellor says, "Can I stop you there? You should do this. Here's a leaflet, goodbye." Or, "Bring my mate, he'll tell you what to do." You know, a recipe, if you will, or advice giving. And I think our form of coaching, or professional development for coaches, is exactly the same. My view is people come into that room, into that environment with everything they need already. And that's a 6-year-old mini and junior player, or that's a 36-year-old professional coach. I think what we all of us seldom understand is that fact. The nature of counselling, capital C, is you have got human resource already. Lifetime experience, network of friends, ability to sit and think deeply about your personal context and aims. But you've forgotten that, for want of a better phrase. So I'm not going to do anything that's additive. I'm not going to teach you anything today or tell you today. We're going to work in an appreciative way. And that word in all its possible meanings. So I think there's a great piece of advice I received from a colleague recently at another institution about, thinking about gratitude. I think I should disseminate, signal, flare towards people. I'm just grateful to be sat with you today, and I'm open, all channels open, to learn from you. Even though, if you like, you formally come to me for help, I think that's the start of the help, because I'm convinced, as I say, you're bringing into the room, in head and heart, everything you need.
I wasn't ignoring you on the phone.
No.
I was just, so I got an email, I was just read this to you this morning, but actually thinking about that from a CPD point of view. So we would come home and go, "Oh, that could have been better, we should, And often you don't see those moments. I got an email of someone just saying, "A fantastic evening last night, 2 problems have been bugging me all summer, got resolved. One through the realisation when watching, one through a conversation with another coach." Some excellent few topics at the end, which have actually helped me finalise the department restructure at work today. Yeah. I'm like, we put up 4 pictures.
Absolutely.
And plan the vision.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like groundbreaking. It was worth so much more than any course I've done. And there was ice cream.
And there was ice cream. That comes out of a word that you've used, which is moment.
Yeah.
I try and base all of my work on that idea. We use a phrase, coaching process. I think that's quite an ugly term. I think process P's are P's, but there's so much missing, So coaching moment, and if you like, as a seed crystal, you can grow a process from, especially Rusty's process and Fletch's process. And now we're getting on to something, because again, the nature of coach as counsellor is personalisation. It has to be by definition, because remember, you've brought everything into the room that we need today, or this session, or this season.
Yeah, you've triggered me actually. So the stuff you've done on the latest level 3 with leadership, where you've got them to talk about their story and their and maybe bring life through some images. And Dean could steal this trick off you. What type of stuff?
It's probably all hat to Dean, to be fair. So yeah, I was asked to present around some level 3 around leadership, management, coaching stuff, and I just thought kind of how it would resonate with me would just be to talk through stories. So there were some constraints around the number. It's a maximum of 5. It's a picture. It's something that means something to you. You can either draw it or you can bring it to life. And then just talk through them. You are where you are now from a leadership point of view, that was kind of the point. And it's based upon this. It's based upon these moments in your life. So a one for me would be the Cub Scout movement in terms of what it afforded me as a young person.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And there's a sense with that it was a tuning fork, wasn't it? Something resonated with you about it. And what we'd love to do is capture what it was so that we can proffer it to other people as an alternative.
Yeah.
It's why I think we spend so much time looking at these values and visions and missions, which can be quite a blunt tool unless you've got a lot of people thinking very hard for a very long time. But if you get it right, if it re-resonates, we now have a language.
Yeah.
So we can always talk about the casserole pot of truth for the rest of our lives. And we will, unfortunately. But for the 3 of us, that is something now that inherently joins us.
Yeah.
So, and all it is a little bit of language, a little bit of noticing. And all of those things are available for us out there, you know. So this idea of moment, understand it, notice it, share it, gratitude might appear in it, clarity might appear in it, which sounds like your example from last night, Rusty.
Yeah.
But from that we can grow a bigger structure, a bigger framework, and get to principles quite quickly. Why was that a moment? What does that say about us? And then from the principles, maybe we can start moving towards, well, this is kind of my process. But that very soft, you know, that's still flexible or adaptable, as you would say, Fletch. Rather than move in the other direction, if at all, rather than get down to a momentary view of what we do, you know. Process for me looks like a steam train going by, you know. I can't really pick out what are the important bits and it's gone, you know. And then if I can't pick out why I'm doing what I'm doing and where it came from, I'm pretty much open to be scripted by other people in other circumstances, which is something that I think is what many clients report in the early stages of a counselling relationship.
Yeah.
You know, they get to a place where the language is shoulds and shouldn't and cans and can'ts and well, who decides?
Always and never.
Always and never. I mean, with the kind of age groups I've worked with in the past, disaster, should, must, can't. You know,
I seen a lot of kids recently miss 2-on-1s, and I'd said, you know, how are you feeling? Oh, terrible.
Yeah, terrible. That's the worst thing that's
2-on-1 in
ever happened to
training session.
Yeah. No, you know, hate, love, they're interesting words, you know. So, and again, notice that we can bring it down to a moment. Language and moment are the same. If we can have a 3-word phrase that captures a lot for us, that's a moment at the same time. And you know, lots of people that, thankfully, I'm working alongside at the moment are looking at coaching, therefore, as that, and we're stripping away, if you like, the sport, the technical, tactical in particular. What is coaching? Absolutely, you need to know your technical pieces in the name of safety alone. But if you've got a ton of ammo but no aim, or if you've got perfect aim and 1 bullet, who's the more effective soldier?
Cool. So one of the questions I'm going to give, I can't find it, but I know it's in there, is, and here's your 1 bullet, describe your coaching philosophy in 1 bullet. So actually a short sentence, what would it be?
My coaching philosophy is quite a long thing, so to actually narrow it down would be...
Come back to you. What are you thinking?
I would say understand options, respect actions.
I think it's about helping people get better. And I think it's people. I get aggravated, even a little bit, when people refer to them as players, I'll be honest.
Yeah, well that was what I heard.
And especially athletes. So, the athletes actually think it's... and in our worst situations, we've heard them referred to as cattle. So that's a bit weird. But actually, just, let's talk about them as human beings. You've had 30 seconds, mate. What are you thinking?
The thing that sort of resonated and probably doesn't make inspire people for lifelong, that would be in there. Definitely would be about improvement on power protection.
Care love would be
they would definitely be in there. I'm going to have to come back as it comes up.
Cool.
I'm going to write down.
Nice, I like it. There's 2 other questions in there, and then I'm going to ask you, what time does Andy Murray go to bed?
No idea.
10ish.
Okay.
Is that question in there?
That's question in there. And the other one was about the duck do, but you didn't. Did you bring the duck do?
Is it in there?
It's in there, yeah.
Well, we'll just wait until he comes.
Oh, right, yeah.
Fine. That's probably one of our best ones, the duck do.
What colour should the waste paper bins be? Great question. Thank you, caller.
Yellow. Yellow. Yeah. What colour do you think they should be?
I think the waste paper bins should be the colour chosen by the people that are going to be using them, because if it's their choice, it makes it slightly more rapidly that they will start to use them.
I think all waste paper bins should look like basketball nets. I think it would be a good a nudge. It would be a good nudge. It would excite me, and they should make some. I
would have a sound or some form of cool stuff about hitting the waste paper.
It's just been copyrighted. It's been done. Magic Academy, waste paper bins, and
the
casserole dishes.
The win bin.
Yeah.
The win bin. The win bin.
The win bin. The learn bin.
Can I pick one?
Yeah.
How do you recreate pressure in training? So there was a longer question really around preparing. Certainly, I think you imagine kids in the pathway to go and play in first teams, to go and play in international environments. How, what are some of the stuff people can go away tomorrow and go, right, I can do this in training. This would help.
Yeah, I think again what would resonate with me would be around understanding the context. What does it look like? So across all aspects of the game. So physically, what does the game look like? What do we want it to look like as well? Again, what would we like to look like from a skill point of view? And then just to replicate that. And it depends on. I'll then treat them all as individuals. So there will definitely be some activity for the team. Then you've got to individualise it. How can we actually support all the individuals around? What does pressure mean to them? Because it would mean different things. Yeah. Some people at that moment in time you'd want to stretch them. Some people you'd want to scaffold or support them a little bit more. It's fundamentally got to look as close to the game as it possibly can. I think that's where we're possibly losing a little bit of traction within the training stuff. I think some players are not seeing the game within their training. They need to be mindful that we're training to get better to play the game, so it needs to kind of smell, feel a lot like the game.
Absolutely. And again, you've used the word support, which is really important. Another pressure or another challenge, it seems to me, is to piece out the moral and emotional dimension of what we're doing. I think the beauty of all forms of the rugby codes, actually, because of the physical challenges that they pose, is that you are directly responsible for supporting teammates in a very distinct way, physically and therefore usually very emotionally as well. These physical environments and contact points ask moral questions of young people. I notice in all forms of work that I do that an important threshold that people cross is their willingness to help other people. I think it's a good cohesive joining point. So you could be a rugby player or you can be a student, but that moment where you think and look and feel outside of yourself, I think is one to notice. We said moments, I think it absolutely is a moment. I think there is another level of support and of praise and encouragement you can give an individual player when you can say to them that you are so gifted, or you're doing so well today because form is temporary, that can you start thinking about how you support player X over here? I think the technical tactical lines of rugby, the fact that I can ask Fletch to support Rusty because that's the way we're going to have a dominant ruck, or whatever the latest language is, naturally allows that person to also discuss with athletes and the people around them that moral emotional segment as well, and I think that's I'm not criticising any other sport, I'm born and bred in and through rugby. I think that's what all codes of rugby give, which is very special and is a resource that we can think very carefully and should think very carefully about using. You know, this idea of building citizens, I guess, that could be where it starts. It's a sport that asks you to help other people, and very often that help is unseen and unheard, except from the person that receives it.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a valuable life lesson right there. But to answer your question, definitely a pressure you can put a physically gifted player under to extend them.
Yeah, no, like it. And yeah, I mean, I played a game at the weekend, and actually my favourite bit was a tunnel at the end, which would be lots of that stuff, and some stuff I just wrote down there around, you know, I love what Sal Sharks are doing around being the best teammate. That's sort of a big area of emphasis. I loved what they talked about in hockey the other day. We need to move away from it being my ball to our ball, which I really liked. And I just think a lot of the work that's going on around players thinking like coaches. How would I support player X? If player X is new to the game, how can I help this person? That was cool, and probably the first thing I wrote down when we spoke about the pressure was meaningful. So actually, what does it mean to that person? So be lots of examples, you know, guys like Theo and that kicked at half-time in England games, but there would also be guys there in South Africa who were playing to where the winner gets to text the loser's girlfriend, and no girlfriend was harmed in this process. There was no text sent, but actually just that very thought, that was meaningful for them. Yeah, I don't think it's something we could do well. We could definitely do it better.
Yeah, I think we can do better. I think we need to, as coaching groups, give that some more consideration about supporting the individuals within a team around the word pressure, and in terms of how we would ultimately look to stretch people and look to move people.
Shall we go for power round? Three questions.
3 questions. How long?
Let's Louis Clark it to 10 minutes each. I could listen to him all day.
With the money he's on.
Absolutely. We're paid from by the hour. How would you change old school coaches? What do you think old school coaches means?
I think your second question is the really powerful one. How would you change anyone? What does the game of rugby attract? I don't think you march up to people to put 2 fingers on their sternum and say you've got it completely wrong and you've had it wrong for 25 years. And you may feel, and sometimes you may be absolutely correct in that perspective, that's a good appreciation of their work. Again, coaching is counselling. How would you change anyone about anything? I think you have to be very clear on the benefits of the new activity. Very clear. From clarity comes, your ability to compel people. Definitely from clarity comes your ability to live those principles yourself. There's nothing punctures an argument quicker than, well, hang on a minute, I've seen you coach Fletch and ... This context we're in, and context is king, I believe. One way we can describe that is the UK is predicated on the valuable volunteer. If guys because of circumstance and because we generally copy who we were coached by initially in careers, if guys have a limited repertoire and someone's perspective is we could be doing this differently and gaining more benefits from that change, if they weren't coaching, there wouldn't be a rugby team, there wouldn't be this debate. So I think that idea of respect and clarity and this compelling argument based on this is how you can benefit people. One thing I think we need to do a lot better on is to join the dots between coaches and coaches in different cultures. I go around the country and I hear the All Blacks do this, the All Blacks do that, the All Blacks do this, the All Blacks do that. But that discussion is usually more pointed towards the players. So as a child might be more inclined to copy a powerful role model player to player, as it were. Maybe coaches, similarly, a misunderstanding what coaching looks like in these other contexts, naturally countries, but just other clubs and other places, and as we said earlier today off mic, but other sports. Then you can start setting up that compelling case for okay, you'd like to win lots of rugby matches because you're a valuable volunteer, and there's no doubt that winning feels a hell of a lot better than losing. We can add some things via conversation to your repertoire, which we're hearing around the country are getting really good results for players of your age group or ability level or investment level. Can we have that type of discussion? You know, again, I travel a lot, and a lot of people come to coaching evenings. You know, a lot of people are giving up their time again. So there does seem to be an open channel of communication. Maybe we have to sharpen up what we're sending down that channel, you know. As I say, if someone walked up to you and said, mate, you've got it all completely wrong, but don't worry, I can fix it for you, I don't think that starts a strong conversation.
What are your thoughts, Rusty?
I was thinking, has that ever happened? My thoughts are, I would want everyone to be authentic. I wouldn't want them to copy other people and try and coach like a Russell Earnshaw or a John Fletcher or a Dean Clark, or actually be yourself. My second thing is probably need to walk in their shoes a bit, understand their context.
For sure.
You know, you go to a lot of environments and actually you don't see the pressures they have, typically from above or parental, or and I would want to build trust. We spoke a lot about like Magic Academy becoming the Airbnb for coaches. So actually, I go and stay at your house and we just connect. So I've deliberately done that with coaches recently. It's cheaper. And when we were going through after you were struggling for money, I was thinking, I can save you some money. I can stay at coaches' houses, but actually just get to hang with them, their families, their kids. You just build up that trust. I was then thinking about two ways I've used that have worked well. Players, so actually getting players to talk about it. This is how your coaching makes me feel. These are the best bits. I love it when you do this. And then other sports, so take it out of your context. Let's not get hierarchical around experience and how much I know about rugby. Let's go and coach kabaddi. 3 of us go and coach kabaddi. Let's go, well, how would we coach kabaddi? What would be, okay, yeah, and actually let's take the principles out of it. And the last thing, which I agree with you, and someone put this to me beautifully the other day, he said, so think of something in your house that's really meaningful. I said, that's fine. There's a picture downstairs from my wife's sister. How would you feel if that picture was thrown out? My wife would feel terrible. I'd feel pretty bad. Have you got pictures in your house that you'd happily be thrown out? Yeah, that wouldn't bother me. Well, think about that when you go into those environments. Which picture are you throwing out? Are you throwing out the picture from their sister-in-law, or are you throwing out that picture?
I like that idea very much. We do a thinking activity. We call it the attic. So we say, conversationally, we say, okay, to demonstrate to you that I'm not really about an additive process, I'm about an appreciative process. Everything you know and value and understand as coaching, and you've been doing it for a long time, is up in your coaching attic. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend half a day together, and you're going to bring it all out and put it on the front door.
We're just stealing coaching attic.
This is class.
So
it's now called it's actually, have you not heard of the Magic
Academy? The Magic Academy attic?
Yeah,
I remember that.
There's an attic in the building.
I'm a huge fan of it. Cool. So there you are, there's everything. Now, you know, again, literally, if I did that in my house, I'm absolutely sure I'd find something of huge sentimental value that I'd forgotten I had. But I'm also sure there'd be something there, well, why haven't I thrown this away? I've never used
tackle
it.
bags. Why haven't I thrown the tackle bags?
Why, you know. So there we are, we're going to do that. Actually, I don't need this anymore, but I know that Fletch is looking for one of these, so I could give some of this away. And other parts of it, I could wait for the right person to come along and put a sign at the front of my lawn saying, free to a good home. So anyone who wants this can have it there. There it is. I'd also find something there that I want to keep, but actually I'm going to keep in the front room now because I forgot I had that, but that really is valuable. And some other stuff I'd put back up in the attic for another day, for another time, another context. I think that's what we're doing initially. That's the Coaches' Council piece. Because then you'd also realise, well look, now we've tidied up the place and there's more room upstairs, we do really need another lamp. We need another rug or whatever. And that's when, if you like, I can't think of a better word than selling can come along.
There's a jumble sale.
Yeah.
There's a Magic Academy jumble sale.
People are primed now, you know, and you can say, well look, here are some of the lamps I've used recently, and I'll be absolutely honest, they've worked really well for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the Magic Academy, you know, network are thinking the same way. A lot of people are turning around and looking at things in a new way. But if you do that first, there's one of two things happen. Firstly, you would say, not today, thank you, and shut the door. Or secondly, you'd buy it because you're a jolly nice bloke, you'd use it for a little while, and then where would you put it? You'd put it up in the attic because you can't find a way to use it day in, day out.
I'm enjoying your metaphor.
I'm enjoying the metaphor.
And that was less than 10 minutes.
Let's
Which is
go.
good. Which is good.
We're doing all right.
I'm going to constrain 30 seconds for this question.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Everybody aware of 30 seconds? Can't read your writing.
What trait
Oh,
/ ability or skill would you like to have from each other? I would have your ability to listen and be curious. I would have your ability to tell stories and use language that I can't use. I like the way you use language.
I would say
Do you want my finger?
pure enthusiasm. But notice that I measured my words and you measured your response. Notice that sometimes that can be seen as a minor slight, can't it?
Yeah.
Especially when an adult's talking to an adult. But I would respect your pure enthusiasm for things and to chase after, and it seems to me that that's what this academy project is trying to prosper. Fletch, we've met twice. I would
You only ever
say
met twice.
we've met twice. I would,
I'm stopping him with it.
yeah. Well, you'd be watching. What a life I lead. I'd rob Rusty's, I have to say. Apologies to Rusty. It does strike me that you are a very intense listener, and that's meant as a huge compliment because that would be the essence of Coach's Counsellor, and that would be a nice way of signalling the kind of shift I think we're talking about with this label. And it's only a label of old school coach and wizard, let's say. I think one way to describe the difference between those two would be, I think the new guy, you'd see a lot more listening and a lot more quality of listening, as opposed to the other guy who might see helping and caring more as a verbal and very vocal activity and a technical tactical one. That would be their form of giving. If you like, they're giving information, and that's powerful if well timed. Whereas the wizard maybe is giving permission, giving time, giving space, giving freedom. I have to say there's a formula that joins both of those. I'm really picking my words carefully because I don't like the idea of turning around to every UK coach over 40 and saying, could you get out of the way, please?
That's both of us.
You know, that's,
Out of the way.
I'm 39.
I think Dean's just thinking you.
I was.
He's assuming
I was, but you had the bravery to say that. So yeah, I think that would be that quality of listening piece would be my pick from Fletch.
Me, Rusty, creativity, thinks differently to pretty much anybody I've met. And yourself, similar, Rusty, would be your stories and your ability to tell stories, to keep it. The reason I'm listening is because I'm intrigued.
Thank you.
I'm making lots of notes. Yeah, I'm actually a little bit distracted because I'm putting some of the things that you're saying and I'm putting them in different contexts and put them in different things.
And that's another point, because if you live in a teach-tell culture, then today isn't too impactful, is it? Because I think from age 0, we imagine that teaching is the sage on the stage or the guy on the mountain in orange robes, and they are perfected, and everything they're saying is perfect. And our stakeholders say the same. I listen to parents talk to their children in a mini and junior environment and say, listen to what the coach says, do what the coach does.
Yeah.
You know, there's a massive, I mean, all they've done is cross a white line.
Yeah.
And there's a massive give over of responsibility, and you know, culturally, you know, it's something that I call the Anglo-Saxon way. We're very respectful of rank. I've got a waterproof coat on with coach written on it. That must mean something. We like praise and punish, we understand that. Very, very big levers, praise and punish. We like order, which I guess is why you guys might get a little bit of pushback, because some of your sessions would deliberately want to be chaotic to give this sense of now go and organise yourself within that.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe we like things to look a little bit more regimented, and we would see learning as the path to learning being repetition, but the proof of learning being repetition as well.
I could listen to you all day. Actually, just trigger. I mean, this is often our debate. So we chatted about this morning. So, coach this week. I think where the Anglo-Saxon way is, I want 100% in every test. I need perfection. It needs to look really ordered. So actually, when you start to ask kids, you know, who would be happy with 60% in a test? Clearly, it depends. However, I would, you know, if you reframed it as 40% stuff you could learn a bit more about or get a bit more curious about, as opposed to actually a sad state of affairs if you got 100% and there was nothing you could go and learn.
Yeah. One of the beauties of working on the course that I do is we have a blend of progressing students and we have a blend of people returning to education. And the guys returning to education blow the minds of the younger students because they say, I'm not interested in my result. I don't want a mark out of 100. I want to know that I'm developing, and that's going to be a conversation, so you're going to experience some pushback from me. But I also want you just to give me a cliff edge. So if you think I'm really struggling, these guys are also really keen on drafting and experimenting as well. I think another threshold that we cross is that, unfortunately in our environment, it's an age threshold generally where we get to a place where, do you know what, I don't mind so much that I'm going to try and fail in front of people a little bit now, in the name of creativity. I don't mind that so much. In fact, I'm going to wear that a bit more of a badge of pride than not. But I'd like, the learner says to me, I'd like a cliff edge where I might not know I'm really wandering off the path, and you will tell me that. And that's generally not a content issue, that's just a time issue that we need to get some of these ideas clarified now, because unfortunately the nature of things is to gain an award you do an assessment, you know, and that's sometimes part and parcel.
That was one of the questions I'm going to ask you actually. What I'm sensing, so last night with the Magic Academy, so John O'Connor's best man speech around, you know, I was in the fourth team, a lot of conversations with the coach, could I have at least a minute's game time today? Yeah. I wasn't this good at this, but actually now really, you know, and probably someone, and wouldn't mind me saying, actually was falling out of love with the game and how he treated people, probably. He is now just on this amazing journey of mastery. At no stage is he saying, when am I going to do my level 3? Or I've done my level 3 last week, I want to do my level 4. So I guess one of the conundrums for you guys is, well, some organisations, some people have gone, we're getting away with qualifications. Yes. We're actually going to focus on mastery, getting better, all the stuff I think as we all get older we probably value a little bit more.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's a tension that we're under and that I actually quite enjoy. Another way to signal the fact that we're moving in a different coaching direction, again, I choose my words carefully, I'm not saying away from old school and towards wizardry, but another way we signal a change is to use the flow of tradition, but to go with it, in that you graduate from a postgraduate award, you go to the God's house, you wear Harry Potter clothing, and the world sees you, you know. And it's really, that's when Anglo-Saxon ideas work for us, because that's a symbol, isn't it? That's really understandable, very portable amongst environments. It's a wonderful celebration. It's a craft of coaching as well, because there's more than one coach in a room, so there's a joined learning journey there. But it does signal a change, because that's something relatively new out there that we can, via reflecting upon our working practices, gain that postgraduate or graduate level. So I thoroughly enjoy it, because I see it as a really authentic, to use your word, Rusty, connection between the very old and the very new. And the rocket pack it gives these guys, I hope, and they tell us privately, is immense, because so much of this with the practitioners, returning to our early discussion about how can we connect with these guys, is a confidence piece. Another Anglo-Saxon trait is we're not so confident about being unconfident. and vulnerable and open. We're very good at being humble, because if you aren't confident in yourself, you can be humble and pass that off, in a public environment. But that sense of what you would want from your player, of I'm really invested in this, we're really invested in each other, I really want to get better at this, I want to do most of that myself, but I'd love your help, is exactly the same route, I think, for coach development. If we can get guys in the same room, and as we said earlier, this conversation that's flaring off in different directions.
Mate, I told you to stick to the agenda. What's
going
on?
I'm huge on the agenda, but it's the
agenda.
This is this could be the new quality conversation, as opposed to, I went to a great talk last night and John Fletcher stood up for an hour, there were 20 PowerPoint slides, I've copied them down, I'm going to live by them.
He hasn't done Leicester yet. You haven't done that Leicester event yet.
Yeah, that's next week.
Next week you're
I'm doing that next week.
This, if we could get comfortable with this, is developmental, and if we transported this out onto the paddock with 30 under 15s as well, it would look and feel like this in a physical sense. I think that's the direction of travel.
I think it's underestimated, the confidence belief piece. So, and people would want to put stuff in a spreadsheet, but I think that's hard to put in. So John would be another classic last night. I love the way you put coaching. You're stood in the middle of it all. You're shitting yourself, excuse my French, and you need to look like you're in control. Actually, we all feel like that.
Yeah.
Actually, let's go and find out that even just the very fact that other people are feeling like that, what are they experiencing, what are some of their solutions, can actually, when we go and try them, and as you said, we see a bit of success.
Yes.
Actually, we just get a little bit taller.
No,
I've seen a lot of people get taller through stuff that isn't sat in a classroom, under a PowerPoint, all that, what we would consider to be normal coach education.
I think you're describing something I'm very happy that I've experienced. I completely get what you're saying. I think that's returning us to moments again, because everything you've just said there looks like and feels like a coaching moment. I think a lot of those are to do with being so open and authentic you can actually notice things live. A great way of demonstrating vulnerability, I think, is to kind of almost a think out loud protocol. So I notice that the longer we talk, the more you use your arms when you're talking, Rusty. A little notice like that. Or I remember doing one quite recently to a learner where, I had an adult learner actually in a very mixed group. I had to say to them privately, you are aware that you are the grandfather of the group, aren't you? What do you mean? Well, every single time you talk, the entire room just freezes. There's a draft because everyone looks at you so quickly that there's chin wind because, everyone, and they hadn't seen or felt that. My huge concern, returning back to this old school population, if you like, is you'd have someone that's volunteered at Old Rudderluckian for 30 years. They're the guy with the big bunch of keys. And they wouldn't have been helped to appreciate all of the contributions that they're given in that wider citizen-shaped measure that I know you care about, Fletch. It isn't just that they may have limited themselves to reviewing themselves in a technical, tactical sense, and that's all, but that they wouldn't have been helped to appreciate everything that they've done. And I find as I go around and talk to people that this is a very common concern of a lot of people. It's a classic thing in education where you can say to a child, that in essence they don't realise how gifted or how much potential they have. But again, the Anglo-Saxon is very uncomfortable with that being an adult-to-adult conversation. And that's magnified sometimes in the UK because the humble, willing volunteer doesn't want to have that conversation. You say that was a great session today. Oh, I just threw it together and I just it's just a hangover cure and it's just how I spend my Sunday morning. And you say, Coach, 200 children ran towards you, fighting to be the first to hug you and touch the hem of your tracksuit. And you don't think that's a hard-won skill, a social good? I couldn't do that. Oh, you could, because they're deferring to, I don't know, age or status, organisational status. You know, oh no, I just throw it together, or I'm just messing around, or I'm not really the coach, I'm filling in for X. Well, if you're filling in for X, you've just connected immediately with 200 people that don't know you so well.
Yeah,
and it's that deflection that's a real concern that we would say to players in a certain environment, wouldn't we? Where the pride, where the feedback. Mm-hmm. I think teaching, helping coaches to do that themselves. Coaches everywhere, not just in high altitude or high performance, but coaches everywhere to do that is hugely important. And what you guys are doing project-wise could be a great platform for it. The sharing and the absolute authentic spirit of experiment that it seems shines off the page to me, especially amongst those junior player environments where the creativity and principles of such is something they may be experiencing in their school lives as well. I think it's hugely valuable.
Ideas for next podcast: appreciation, noticing. I like Fletch's feedback around. I'd love you to coach my son. I think that's a great piece of feedback. And I'm definitely thinking, what A levels did you do? So did you do A level English?
I did A level English.
Did you do drama?
Yeah. No, but I was dramatic.
Yeah, I've heard. So you did A level English. Which other ones? Arts?
If you ask someone, they'd say I did A level rugby, A level cricket, A level running, and A level.
Well, what A levels did you do?
So I did A level English, A level history, A level economics, and back in the old days, general paper.
General studies.
General studies.
I did general studies.
Which I absolutely loved.
Because it was easy.
Because,
you got an A.
In your case, it must have been easy. I loved it because it was like, good grief, 1980s boys' grammar school, but it was, what do you want to write about? It was the first time I experienced that.
The non-Anglo-Saxon way.
Bit of a non-Anglo-Saxon.
Right, on that, quick question. Let's make it quick. 2 current laws or scoring systems in the game that you would change and why? Or remove? What sort of stuff would you do in the game?
I'd speed up. You have to set that time in which to make decisions. So it might be a penalty. You've got 10 seconds to make a decision. I would, and I like the stuff around being incentivised to score from further away, and probably with less phases. So actually, let's incentivise line breaks, keeping the ball off the floor. But that's my bias. Lots of other people would go, it's 20 points for a rolling maul try. So I'm comfortable that that's one that they're excited about.
Mine would be, with juniors, would be replays and players actually decide on stuff, so possibly just give them a bit of time to breathe so they can better understand what's going on, but it would be player-led. Coaches can probably be in attention just to possibly nudge, but certainly to notice some stuff. So that would be around the juniors.
When you say replay, what do you mean?
Replay would mean something's either gone well or not so well. You have a X number of replays. You can set up exactly the same situation. Can you do it again? Can you do it even better? Can you do it different?
Cool.
I think people would benefit from that.
I call that a mulligan in golf.
A mulligan, yes.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. Yeah, just ignore that one.
Yes.
Just pick it up.
That window was broken when we got here.
And then, similar to you, again would feed my biases towards the game. I think where low numbers are having more impact effectively in attack, then that would be rewarded with points, as would scoring from a little bit deeper, because I think it would change the mindset of the game. So if you score from deep, or if low numbers are having an effective part in a try, then you get rewarded with more points.
Can I ask you both this one?
Yeah.
If you could change one thing about how you were coached as kids, what would it be?
I would say it was rare that the player was given a chance to express an option or a perspective. So we were doing that. There are some classic things I think the game allows and that childhood prompts. We were making up moves, whole team moves, 15 phase moves, giving them funny names, practicing them on our own, and then saying, "Can we try this?" Pretty classic stuff. Yeah. Really hugely enjoyable stuff. Right at the start, we were talking about player engagement. Really, really engaging stuff. and ludicrous stuff that would never have worked. But there was always a sense that that was massively, massively counterculture. So that instead it was, here is a very limited palette of responses. I don't say moves. We were blessed in that we weren't whiteboarded or chalkboarded. You know, it was more, blessedly for me, play. You played the game. So here's a scrum. The ball will go from 9 to 10, and then we'll have a look. We'll have a look and a think. And then it was more about bringing in the cliff edges in to kind of narrow down your options. It was very, very rarely, here's a move called red one and this is what we're going to do. And I think that was a real blessing. But to have been more often able to join that conversation, as you will, especially because the nature of schoolboy rugby, at least for me, was that you're going to be around for 6-7 years.
Yeah,
It's very much the same kind of school team, the same group of people. That could have really driven an evolution for me. I look back now, in particular, on my personal playing experience. I mean, the puberty fairy came to live in my house for 3 days. So I was taller, a little bit taller, and a lot heavier than I am now when I was 13. That tends to mean you get a lot of success by one measure in the game, and that's certainly, you know, what happened to me. Trying to extract the pros and cons from that is very interesting. One of the huge pros is that I'm sat here with you guys now because of that. Because from that came a flow of life experiences all linked through the game. But no, that sense of being involved in the conversation. Another thing I would have liked to have done to answer the earlier question was, I think, getting players to play in different positions.
That was
per game. That should be the nature of the game at that age group, if not at higher age groups and other levels. There's no better way to learn than to play inside or outside of where you're playing. I think a sensible view could be made on the safety aspects of that, so I'm not just saying that for the back line, I'm saying that for all the players. But yeah, living in those different roles and experiencing that game and therefore all of its different challenges at a younger age, you know, rather than a recent experience where a 13-year-old walked past me with a scrum cap and a protein shake and said I'm a loose head. You know, I can't really get on board with any part of that sentence actually. I think that would really stretch some people. And then the old school PE teacher in me would say that everyone plays in every game and a significant amount of time.
Yeah, that would be. I was fortunate. I had a remarkable experience in all sports. So I had some people who were really kind, who afforded me and lots of opportunities. Possibly because I had some ability, I was actually playing in positions where I was learning some stuff. But mine would be the same as yours. Mine would be around, on reflection, maybe some other people didn't get some opportunities. I probably didn't see that at the time.
special guest.
Special guests. That's exciting. So yeah, that would be what would resonate with me, and possibly afforded some opportunities to play in some slightly different positions. But saying that, often I played in the middle of the pitch. I was given some opportunities.
I would have preferred to play a bit more wide in the backs, and I was lucky. I had awesome coaches. Awesome. Loved it. So have we got another question? Have we got another one?
I've got one. How are you feeling? Was that just a midway point type thing?
No, it was really. I mean, one of the questions was actually about, I think, around how important is it about how people feel, or how, you know, I mean, where do you see that fitting in? What are you thinking when there's a question about feeling?
Well, it's pretty easy with me. I would have a strong feeling preference. I would make lots of decisions based around good and how I feel. It's definitely got me into trouble at times. I think we do need to check in with people. Even just as casual as how are you feeling would be a useful question for people to be asking each other, and to be a question that is asked in the coaching environment. Some people would struggle with it. We've coached some players recently who actually strong thinking preference. Ask them how they feel. They spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, I think I
feel okay. Cool. So yeah, I think it's important. I think people having an awareness of that, people people just asking a question, I think, would be then healthy in terms of what, what's your thoughts on it?
One place I point the phrase feeling is, how does the coach feel? I think there's a couple of coaching lessons there. We go out there, it's a performative activity. I think players of all ages actually read off you your mood, and watch you very intently. I remember in my very first year of teaching, a lad came up to me who I'd never spoken to, and he was, "Sir, why do you always wear red trainers on a Tuesday?"
I'm enjoying the cats walking across the street.
The cats walking towards the fish.
Good one, Max. You can get those fish.
So a sense of knowing that you're being watched and using that as a resource, and knowing what your mood is. And I don't mean by that hiding what your mood is, we're talking about authenticity. So another vulnerability point might be to verbalise how you feel today and why. I also think that's another coach-player conversation. It's interesting that in the long-term coaching relationships, maybe in other sports, the more individual sports, the tennis and the athletics of the world, there seems to be a lot more dialogue about that. How they feel in physical shape, how they feel in emotional shape. You get a greater sense of negotiation of, what are we doing today? What's our training day today? What are you up to? How are you feeling? How are you looking? Now, a lot of that is absent from team game, ball game, because there's one of you and 30 of them, not one of you and 4 or even 1. There's 4 to 6 in the sprint group, and you can spend 8 hours together on the track and sit down and talk, because today less than 90 minutes of that will be physical activity. But I think that sense of how are you doing must be the route to who are you, which then must be the route to who are we, and then becomes the route to, well, where are we going to go then? And again, is there time more on our side, more often than we feel, think, to understand that and to use that? Is there downtime, off grass time, that actually is prime coaching time?
I was just thinking the same thing of coach wellbeing, when's that feeling, coach resilience, and then one of the reasons we chat about this, often joining with some training, or when I played on Sunday, having not played again for 5 years, you forget how it feels. I think we're a little bit concerned at measuring, datification, science, and actually, I was thinking on Sunday, probably the fittest I've ever been in a while. I was training for it, and I know you're looking at me thinking, no, that's not possible. And then I didn't feel anything like that after about a minute. And then it was really interesting, just, smelling deep heat in the change room, how that made me feel.
How did it make you feel?
I'd said to the guy next to me, you've already got me fired up. Just hadn't smelt that. Hadn't been in that environment for years where it's, the game's about to go on.
Metal studs on concrete.
Ready for it. And, all of that.
Cool. Question, how do you adapt cards to a professional setting? Have you ever found resistance? So from a rugby context point of view, yes, resistance around in first teams and the performance stuff, not necessarily by everybody. Would you adapt it? Possibly. I think the Falcons have done a good job, Newcastle Falcons, around that. Actually, what does it mean in that space around transitioning from age group into the first team? What are useful skills or behaviours for those players to consider moving forward? I still strongly believe there wouldn't be a first team coach in a team sport that wouldn't want players who are creative, have good awareness, can react and adapt well or can be resilient, make good decisions, and have the ability to self-organise on and off the pitch. So I do think they're relevant. And I think what the Falcons have done is really smart around just kind of rebranding that a bit, fitting in line with a little bit more the language around the first team. But having some priority skills or behaviours, I that stage or stage of a player's development, I think is really useful. It's useful for the players and also the people supporting the players. If they have getting away from not just the technical and the tactical, but what else is going to be helpful and useful to help the team perform well and win stuff.
Yeah, and actually I was thinking about too, I've heard of situations where academy players go into first team because a couple of things go wrong and they're thrown out of sessions. Well, maybe think about how did you help prepare that person. So football is a good example. So sea of creativity becomes sea of consistency, because the first team coaches decided that actually this is what cards looks like. It's consistency, it's robustness, it's the ability to repeatedly train, because that's the way you're going to get better. Well, let's support those players. Let's actually say what's our true north from a first team point of view. What's the stuff we've noticed that would help support these young people in this transition?
Yeah, I would just add the word "and." There's creativity and consistency. I don't think it's one or the other. I think the card skills and there would be other skills. I think you would add some stuff. I don't think you would necessarily replace it. I think it's creativity and consistency. I wouldn't replace creativity with consistency. I would just add some stuff. You might have a slightly less, or spend less time, or attend to it less. However, I think it would be and.
Yeah, it might look slightly different in that environment. That would seem perfectly reasonable to me.
I don't think there's resistance, possibly because there's a lack of awareness and understanding. So I've heard some people throw away, they would be pretty dismissive of it in terms of.
Maybe a good question, and maybe a way to think about it is: look, if you take away the technical, tactical, you're experts in that. What are the other skills you're coaching? What's the stuff that's gonna help you win?
Yeah.
Whatever win means.
Whatever success looks like.
Is it a long question?
It's a long question. However, it's about what has been the biggest mindset change you've seen when using challenge cards. Are you aware of the challenge cards? Have you seen the Magic Academy challenge cards?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Have you bought some?
I haven't, no.
Yet.
I haven't.
The power of yet.
Yet. I'm considering that decision, and I will self-organise in that direction, I'm sure.
Who would be like you? Which other universities would be on a similar kind of level to you from a coaching point of view? Which other environments?
Oh, well, I mean,
Give me some of those that are doing some great stuff.
It's other great conversations at the moment. We work in this level 4 community. That's been a great place to learn. That stresses again a threshold.
Everyone in that level 4 community has bought a set of cards. Apart from you.
Which
how are you feeling?
makes me feel.
How are you feeling?
With you pointing and shouting at me, quite normal, quite calm.
That's not a shout yet.
Actually, quite normal, quite calm. Enjoying putting my invoice in. I would say that creating a space, that's a great example of creating a space. So you can join the old and the new. So I'm a little bit on the shelf about levels 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that kind of sets people up to climb a ladder quite quickly. I've worked as a tutor in the past with someone on a level 1 course that asks a question that has made a group of level 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 type people stop in their tracks. I think that's always a good environment to give people a permission to do that, a psychological permission as much as a formal one. So those are always good conversations. I think very much that move, because unless you have a playing background to a degree, and not all of my colleagues do in these networks, it removes really quickly the technical tactical. So you very much by default actually go to what is coaching then, wherever she is done. And that's always really interesting. Many of these colleagues work externally in other non-sport professions, and that brings in other voices and other perspectives. Still about maximisation, still about performance and results, absolutely. In some of those environments.
I'm going to ask Clark a question. So you can design a pack of coaching cards. You're allowed one card. And you've got to give it to one person.
Yeah.
What's on the card? Who's the person? And you can think
I mean, if it's a pack of cards, I think I'd have a joker in there. I think I'd have a joker in there, and the joker would prompt this turn in the relationship. It would be, we're going to stop now. It's to a player. The player can stop the session, and the player can talk about how the coach is doing.
Adds to the next pack of cards.
A joker card. What's going on right now? I also think another conversation starter would be give a card of that kind to a stakeholder. So classically the parent watching the child. Because I think you would, that might be another way to prompt this conversation between old and new, as it were.
You'd be pleased to know both of those things are captured in the cards. So actually, probably the players reflecting in the moment, pre the session, after the session, engagement with, for example, parents. But the cards would generally be quite open-ended, so actually engage two parents. So actually,
I'd like the feeling of the joker being a bit of a shield as well.
Being a bit of
a shield. So like, the old school English student in me, the joker can say whatever he likes in front of the king, and that's his job. So you could give to that younger player the joker card. They can pick the joker card, and they can say that this isn't going so well.
Nice. I don't know if you've noticed, but no one's engaged.
For example, I've not touched the ball for a while. I've not used my first name today. I don't know. We could all think of a host of things.
What do you think the benefit of challenge cards are?
Stuff I said before, really. I think it allows you to be authentic. So let's give an example. Give feedback in 3 different ways.
Yeah.
So A, it raises your awareness of it. B, it allows you to fill in the blanks, so you can be creative. You can find your own solutions, and we will all find different solutions to it. I think it's a bit like these questions. They feel a bit different. They don't feel like anyone owns them. To me, it doesn't feel like, this. These are pretty open questions anyway, but actually it allows people choice. They could go, actually, I want to try this card, or Clark, I was thinking, do you fancy trying this card? Or, so I think it probably takes away that, it breaks down some barriers. As you said earlier, it feels playful and fun, which is stuff that, fuels all my bias around what sports should feel like, especially, lower down. And, when we're asking about how coaches feel. I mean, you have one life, so I would want it to feel quite playful and quite fun. I'd be pretty disappointed if it was all serious. And
there's a sporting example that can carry on opening up these channels of communication amongst coaches across levels of player investment and ability or personal investment. What we notice anecdotally and also to a degree scientifically is ultra high performance is connected with relaxation. If we're going to go back to the All Blacks as our bellwether, okay, a very common comment is they play with smiles on their faces, and not just when they're beating someone 50-0. When something breaks down,
Kieran Reid. So if you watch Kieran Reid, when the pressure comes on, the challenge comes on, he is smiling because actually, physiologically, it's the best thing for your body.
Absolutely. There's 2 levels to it. They are enjoying it. It is an emotive, ludic experience, playful experience. Absolutely. But also there's that sense of, and this is what I would wish for any coach, any player, any learner, anywhere. There's that sense of, I'm doing what I'm meant to do. I'm being where I'm meant to be. Of that release, which would be the classic way of describing this coach's counsellor piece, that you release people. I'm not adding, I'm subtracting. I'm taking away barriers. I'm taking away your self-imposed limits. I'm doing that. I have to be massively authentic to do that because I've got to make a compelling case for that. The best way to make a compelling case is to use evidence that can't be denied. So what do? I listen very carefully. You've just said the words player X, you've just said the words can't, never. Do you mean that? Do you think that will never happen? Well, I don't mean never. Oh, okay, so it might. Oh, it might. When do you think that's more likely to happen? Have you ever done it? once. I did it last time when, oh, so if we recreated that, it's more likely to happen. Yes, I tell you what, I think you can do it. I've seen you do it more often than I think you realise. You know, the game's cruel at times, isn't it? Because we praise, the Anglo-Saxon in us praises and negates outcomes rather than intentions. You know, I'm reading a lot at the moment about the constraints-led approaches, and I'm trying to dig into it, and I'm not being false humble. I find some of it difficult. I do, the language and the application of it and seeing it in the real world, and I'm getting better at that. But what I like is that idea of thinking about intention.
Yeah.
I saw that you were free. I didn't pass you the ball. Isn't failure, it's success. I judged that at the moment my total envelope of performance, I can't get the pillar across to you.
Yeah.
So actually, it's pure judgment on my case.
Yeah. And often as coaches, we think we can work out their intention without even questioning them or
Absolutely.
Stepping into their shoes and understanding.
Which, if you live on the whiteboard, is an easy trap to fall into, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's a circle with 13 on it. There's a circle with 14
we can give them their intention.
And on the whiteboard,
there's your intention.
On the whiteboard, there's an arrow that joins them, but you didn't do that.
Yeah.
What you did was you dropped it onto your knee, did a roly-poly, picked it up again and scored the try. And I'm upset because we don't do that in that move.
Yeah. I mean, so that's it. I mean, so you look at the constraints, and we joke about it, but the language around affordances, non-linear, or real lots of language I think people find confusing. And you work in an academic institution. I mean, how's it translated?
I think what you do with any of these new ideas is you are grateful that they're perturbing what we think coaching is and does, and what learning is and does. One of my favourite reads is a pedagogue from America called Judith Rink, and she warns us against what she calls versus thinking. So learning is complex, I think we'd agree. It's probably not fair to say there's one theory that captures it all. I am aware that I've learnt by repetition, I'm aware that I've learnt by copying, I'm aware that I've had an insight in the moment that's really accelerated me on. Each of those would live in a different pool of theory. Yeah. So it's probably a combinatory effect that's going on. Good coaching would probably draw on all of those pools, for example. So versus thinking where I'm right, you're wrong, probably not so much. Words like affordance, I spoke about a year ago with Keith David. You know, he said, think of it as an invitation to act. And for me, because I love language, isn't that wonderful? You know, it's an invitation. And what I love about that phrase is the softness to it, because I could turn that invitation down.
Yeah.
But also, it just captures.
Might be a really nice party to go to.
You know, it just captures what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And to another audience, I'm sure there's more scientific terminology, but invitations, a sense of the coupling of perception and action, just aware, you know, just awareness.
English, yeah.
You know.
Which you'll say is just information.
Absolutely.
Can I ask this question?
Yeah, sure.
Everyone's allowed 2 answers for each, so you can't explain why. Best coaching or learning environment you've been in, 2 times 2. Book recommendations. We go one. We could just go in order. Right. So let's go. Learning environment. So learning environment.
Best learning environment I've seen.
Let's get people curious and going into places.
There'd be a number of rugby regional academies. I'm going to be biased.
You're going to say the Falcons?
I'm going to say the Newcastle Falcons.
Cool.
I'm intrigued.
I would go old school. When I was a student, we were very, very fortunate to be encouraged at a younger age to feel about ourselves that we were going to change and revolutionise things. The guys that were talking to us about that had done that. So, you know, my blessing was to study and think alongside Rod Thorpe, Dave Bunker, people like that. they implicitly gave you a feeling that an opinion was required, and that was how you'd earn membership into this group. You know, you'd achieve something to be in and amongst people on this course, but what was required was an opinion. That was the way, if you like, that you'd carry that badge. And they were very open that you would get a little bit of pushback. You know, you'd go to your first teaching job, let's say, and be somewhat, you know, constrained perhaps. But that sense of, outside of, you know, the usual methods of education in a formal environment, that sense of that we owe each other things, we're standing for things here. The people in front of you have defended those principles in every sense of that word, and you're going to need to do that yourselves in the future. I just found inspiring, but also really clarifying.
I'm going to Brit school. Second one.
The Score Takes Care of Itself. By
Bill Walsh.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first books that a chap called Steve Black actually gave me out of his massive library. Yeah, that's a good impact. What was yours?
Book called Brunelleschi's Dome.
Sammy, mate.
Brunelleschi's Dome. So
The English dictionary.
Yes.
Can't you put the English dictionary and Roget's thesaurus? This
is like the Wizard Academy Desert Island Disc. The Bible, the works of Shakespeare.
We fall asleep every night to we should actually do that. We should actually do a Desert Island Discs for coaches.
There we are.
Magic Academy, Desert Island.
Yeah, in the attic.
Rusty, yours?
Sapiens.
Why?
Gives you context, helps you better understand humans, where we came from, what our origins are, why we behave like we behave. Next learning.
Even why you?
Evenly. Why a learning environment, coaching environment. You've had one. What's your second one?
Well, my second one would be.
Do you want me to start?
England under 18s, 2017. It's a pretty good place.
Yeah.
You?
I think Magic Academy School as a virtual place. I think the classroom, 2 years teaching, taught me shed loads. My God, if you ever think you're trying to pretend you're in control and you have no idea what's going on, then go and stand in a classroom full of kids who have absolute clarity that you do not know what's going on.
Oh yeah.
Most impactful, I mean, biggest coaching moment, but that was the classic, was a kid saying to me, you know, so what's X in efficiency? And me saying, I think it's this, and him just going, sir, you have no idea, do you?
Yeah.
And me going, don't tell anyone.
Yes.
This is
we are joined together for life.
And if you guys work really hard, I won't have to.
Yeah.
What do you think in one more, like, environment you've noticed or been in or heard of? Or?
An environment that interests me, that I'm working in more and more at the moment, is the military environment. So I'm working with some guys around professional development within some arms of the armed forces. And it's an interesting dynamic to be in, because if you're in a mixed room, there's rank in the room in a very real way. So we get very quickly into thinking about permission. Who has permission to do or say anything? Some of these guys will eventually transition out of the forces, so they're wearing a number of hats immediately. But the openness to new ideas has been something that's surprised me and been really gratifying. You know, very much different to just deferring to the professor, as it were, but genuinely being open to and using ideas. We've done a lot of work on how you can use and think about silence, for example, and people have reported back, you know, using that in context and it being powerful for them. So yeah, the ability for guys to invite and embrace and reflect upon.
Military would be a good place to go actually, because we see lots of power dynamics going on in coaching. So head coach, you know, all that type of stuff going on. Second book, Sarah J. Blakemore, Inventing Ourselves, The Secret Life of the Teenage Brain. It's helping me get through a teenage son. Really good understanding. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
We're just starting to understand, you know,
Yeah.
some of the stuff that's going on. Second book, what are you thinking? You know?
Can we move on with time?
Oh,
Sorry,
go on, mate.
just there's quite a lot of questions I think we can answer pretty quick.
Go on, then.
Go on.
Your code. This one, Derek and Rusty. If you run the DPP, what guiding principles would you establish? DPP, you're the head DPP.
Do they feel loved? Think longitudinally, think individually, think of them as a family, not just a kid. How are we going to engage the rest of the people that are around this child in this, you know, what could be an inspirational experience. My son's in the DPP. It's his, you know, it's his most amazing highlight of the week.
Yeah,
country mile.
that would be the same as my son. The best moment he would have in the week would be his experience it.
Cool. Here's one actually. So, how would you frame competition away from the traditional? So, what type of stuff would you do? Once again, 20 seconds.
Competition. Again, I would be flexible with it. It would depend on that day. I would agree with the coach at that moment, taking some information around what actually does the teams look like. What are we working on? What stuff do you think is going to be helpful? It's raining. It's a small pitch. Maybe we should score different.
Yeah.
I think it's a game changer. I think we should do that. What stuff do we want to attend to today at this moment in time? Can we come up with some constraints or some scoring system which would be part of
let's score behaviours, let's score values, let's think about that.
Yeah. So and that needs to be tied in around the, you know,
and the red bibs. So I think everyone who's new, you know, so if you're a 15-year-old kid, you're new to the game, should be able to wear a red bib in a game that actually allows you to have certain things that will get you into the game, help support you. As opposed, you know, we wouldn't bring a kid who's new into the school and struggling in maths. We wouldn't just plunge them straight into the top set of maths and go, right, off you go and drown. We would actually support them.
Cool, get that. This is one for you, Clarky. How do you break down people's view of what coaching should look like?
I think
60 seconds.
60 seconds.
I'm actually going to start talking.
Exactly what we're doing today. I think coaching is about personal vulnerability and clarity. So conversation is a good way to demonstrate that. I do think people like to be compelled towards role models that they understand at levels of the game or sport that they understand. So demystifying what actually happens in a national squad, a successful national squad, across a number of sports. That this caring, family, nurturing approach is it. At those levels would be the two things. So you kind of understand better what it looks like at the top of the mountain, but also if you're a valley dweller for the rest of your coaching career, that's, you know, that's fantastic. That's what nurtures us and gets us up to the top of the mountain as individual athletes and learners. So you've got to understand what your coaching is and kind of live it every day. It gets back to that compelling argument. You know, you cannot and should not take my point of view if I don't appear to be adhering to those values myself.
Do you want to pick one out the Casserole?
While you're doing best learning moment as a coach, mine was, when I think about it, Jess Breach, England under 18 women. Jess Breach, me trying to be sarcastic as I always are. I had to find Jess, just ignore the touchline. Power stare from Jess Breach. Actually, wow, I've got this wrong. Interestingly, I asked her about it the other day. She doesn't remember it. But for me, it was definitely like, wow. I might need to adapt my coaching here to these people individually.
I remember my very, very first teaching lesson as a full-time teacher.
Can I cross my arms and be like this?
Gymnastics. I was absolutely terrified. Ran the lesson plan to the letter.
Yeah.
That was 20 minutes of a 1 hour session. And everyone was looking at me. And I literally remember looking at the clock and seeing the second hand move backwards.
See your friend off?
Yeah.
Did it feel like
mine, yeah.
Did it feel like this?
Seeing the second hand move backwards.
Did it feel this awkward?
No, I felt more awkward in the sound.
So what did you do? What did you do for the next 40 minutes?
Well, I mean,
Repeat.
the technical term is I blagged it. No, it just taught me what it is, because I had to notice what was in the room right now. I had to notice what had just been done. I had to think about, is it just me that has to lead this? So there was a gymnast in the room. So, okay, we've done our foundation piece or our warm-up piece, he said, lying to young children, which is, you know, the nature of it. So now we're going to go on to the next phase, and Jim Jones, you're going to now choose an action, and I'm going to stress you by asking you to coach it. I know you can do it physically, but we're going to think as well in this room, aren't we, always? And everyone else is going to have a go at that action. Where that came from, the ancestry of that, I have no idea, but that's what I said and did. And if you like, in an hour was an entire coaching career, because I went from completely on the script, feeling comfortable, feeling quite prepared, still feeling I was doing the best for the guys in front of me, not on autopilot by any means, to you've got to, in the moment, do this and draw upon as many things as possible. You know.
Do you know what I thought you were going to say? We played hangman for 4 minutes.
Yes! We all sat cross-legged. Like with each of them a Mars bar, and we never spoke about it again.
Go on.
Slightly reframe it. It was only a few years ago, actually. Yeah, I think you probably know what I'm going to say. So I'm refereeing, so coaching a game, internal game. Archie, my middle child, sets himself in a position around a tackle situation, gets knocked back about 3 or 4 metres in mid-air. As he's in mid-air, he's sort of looking at me thinking, what's going on, Dad? I then asked him the question of what feedback did he get there. We had a brief conversation. I then asked him what he's going to do about it. And then what I've seen over the next 3 or 4 situations, which was similar to that, was definitely learning, because he changed his behaviour and he's continued to change that behaviour. And it's been a really impactful question for me. What feedback are you currently getting, and what are you going to do about it? And I'm excited to be watching it and looking to support you further.
That is now just how you coach. What feedback do you get? What are you going to do about it?
I think you could do
what
a
feedback
whole
did you get? What are you doing about it?
Yeah. I think you could do so, and then you would need to scaffold or support them around that. Wouldn't necessarily just, probably my relationship with Archie meant, and then I kept the word, and I'm sure I used some other sort of coaching skills around that. But that was the most impactful, and I'd coached a long time, and I hadn't really framed it like that.
Actually, just thinking of coaching, Alice, look, we need to create moments where they get feedback, and feedback is from us to them, from them to us, not us to them.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that would be a good place for lots of coaches to start thinking. If you could give English players one super strength, what would it be?
Is this a question?
Yeah.
Or if I was to give English players?
One super strength to English rugby players, or the players generally, what would it be?
Curiosity.
Nice.
Continue to be curious. Continue to just see what is possible. Explosive stuff.
I'm saying the same because that was such a good answer. Anything I say now will be completely underwhelming. I was thinking of scanning, now I'm thinking, oh God, mindful curiosity.
Oh.
Terrible. I'm thinking curiosity. What are you guys thinking?
That's a
curiosity.
You've inspired me there.
I think we can edit it so you said it first. so it sounds smaller. I'm just going to, because we are constrained a bit of time. Most enjoyable coaching moment? What's your highlight?
I like that moment where, in game time, the player uses that phrase that we've developed together, of movement that we've developed together, and there's that unspoken look between the two of us, that recognition of, we've just done that live, and that's a thing that we developed. We built that together. I've just used it, and especially, when it's very unspoken, extremely non-verbal, very gestural. I think that's coaching money right there.
Mine would be when a child, hand in hand with his parents, came and said, I was going to stop playing this sport. Not that long ago. However, now I love it. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. That was the most enjoyable coaching moment I've had.
How am I following that? Probably had some recent emails from students that I taught economics to. You inspired me to do economics, and now I've got an amazing mentoring job. I'm so happy, and those would have been some of the most difficult students I had. If you were to mentor someone hierarchically high up in an organisation who's quite dictatorial, what would your advice be? So what stuff are you thinking? One thing you're thinking?
I'd say I would be extremely authentic with them. And I think you'd have to place it amongst feelings. When you do this, I am made to feel like that, which gives a chain of causation to these behaviours. I'm not saying I'm being a saint, I'm saying that these behaviours lead to outcomes, and you're about outcomes, I would imagine. And some of those outcomes are very results based, or at least efficiency based. It's still the same gig. When you do this, I feel like that. The side questions, of course, being, I wonder if you notice that. If you do, why do you keep doing it? If you don't, why not?
I can't follow that.
I can't follow that either.
Yeah, same. So I would try to link
Impact.
Impact in terms of how people are feeling. Have some conversations around that. I'm sure possibly their intentions wouldn't be that.
I mean, it's interesting. So we're both going to go and look at hockey. So actually, one of the things I'm excited about is the people involved with hockey, and someone like a Danny Kerry would be. So I would use language. My observations from him would be around, vulnerability. I've heard him tell a lot of people a lot of times, this is what it used to be like. This was the feedback I got. This is how I felt. So actually, it's okay to be vulnerable and actually care and love. Actually, the way when we did the conference recently with the Q&A with the girls, and actually his concern about what comes after hockey, what's this kind of dual career thing that they're really passionate about, their lifestyles. Emma Mitchell's, she would be a big part of their programme and their meetings, and actually that's genuine care. So actually I think it would be that it's okay to care about people. I think that's important for people to understand.
I think we're nearly there. I think there's one each. So, do you want everyone to grab
Mate,
that?
I think it's going to be the duck thing though, isn't it?
Here we go. What time does Andy Murray go to bed?
Someone said to me last night, is it 10 o'clock?
Tennis.
But it's 10ish. It's 10ish.
That's dreadful.
Yeah, actually, that one's for you as well. Can you read that up?
What's the duck do?
Whack, whack.
Right.
Okay, that's all.
This is actually the last.
Come on, then.
I mean, what have we got? So, I've got the
Let's go this one. Am I allowed to say his name? Would it be cool? I should just play alike.
Yeah, it was no. So there's a kid at Albastallions who's was Girl of Steel last year. Jack Potter, aka the saviour of Albastallions, who would be a kid that would just would want to throw mud balls, have piggybacks, kind of be with his mates, and there's often different motivations within teams. So we would have kids in OB, some of whom would be in a DPP, some of whom would be they just hang with their mates. So the question is actually how would a Premiership coach, or what would your advice be, or
how would a Prem coach manage players like Jack Potter?
I think the best Prem coaches would be fine with them. I think they would care and understand and get to know his context and go and hang with him and give him some of his needs.
And what about the
Some of his
opposite?
wants as opposed to his needs.
What about the opposite to that?
He wouldn't be playing again.
Cool.
I think there's lots of clubs where Jack Potter would thrive. I think there's lots where
He would struggle.
he would struggle.
Yeah, and that's
There'll
definitely.
be lots of those kids around. I think of it like this. So everyone's obsessed with drawing a pyramid that looks like this, and I think of it like that. So how can we engage different people so we can grow the game? So how can we engage the mums? We'll have a Pilates on a Sunday morning, and afterwards they'll have a bit of a run around, whatever it might be. Let's just engage more people because our sport can do wonderful things. Last question: what's your best question?
What's your best question?
Yeah. Can I share mine? What do you guys think? I'm doing much more questioning where it's players giving feedback to other players, and I just generally trying to use players that, especially with the teenage boys. So we work with a lot of teenage boys, So tell me what Fletch is good at, but actually getting the better players because they would value the feedback with their friends and the tribe more than me. This peer stuff's really important, and I've physically seen kids grow. And I'm moving away from necessarily who's the best at this, because once again we get the best kids being talked about a lot, to actually, either what have you noticed Fletch getting better at, or who have you noticed who's doing some stuff that they've been practicing and they've brought it in, as opposed to who's the best and constantly giving them, because our preferences would be, and part of work with the 18s would predominantly be around the best players. You know, how are we going to create players that can go and rock it for England? However, you would want to give everyone an amazing experience. And I love that, you know, Don used to talk at Saracens, we're judged by the kids that don't make it. So I would be excited that, you know, that everyone, I would sleep well at night, that everyone had an amazing experience.
Mine would be, did you notice that?
There's a whole podcast around those.
Did you notice that? In the moment, authentic, drawn out of me by what's happening rather than pre-planned. And if someone else said, no, we can talk about it. If someone else said, yeah, I saw this, okay, that wasn't the direction I was going, but that's fine. So a freedom and an allowance, but also, and more so actually, an opportunity to appreciate and display some gratitude.
Mine would be around, probably use the word well, I would use the word exciting or excited. Well, what are you excited about? What sort of stuff? I would be curious about that, and then I would probably reference into how can tomorrow be even more exciting type stuff, or what sort of stuff you're thinking. So they're good questions to ask young people. I think words such as exciting would be stuff, and I definitely get your point. Rather than best type stuff, you know, what sort of stuff's inspired you today? How are you going to be even more tomorrow type stuff? Stuff around that growth stuff.
Now the casserole dish is empty.
It's empty.
Peeps.
That's it.
General high fives.
General high fives.
Well done, peeps.
Hugs of
First
all
podcast done. Yeah, that's it really, isn't it?
Good question.
Thanks for coming. Strong work.